I just wanted to talk to you today about how our minds work, because it'll help you to understand why we have found ourselves in this situation of mass hysteria, to be frank. Um, the, the whole world has gone into this lockdown, but the main thing is that we have all picked up on each other's fear. Fear is a really big problem in this situation, because the fear makes us not reason things properly, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. And so what we have to do is to get ourselves into this present moment and find out if we're actually under a real threat at this moment. So I see some of you are sitting in your gardens. There's no threat to you whatsoever. Some of you are sitting in your houses. There's no threat to you whatsoever, but it doesn't stop us from picking up on the fear. I break fear down into false evidence accepted as reality. And the false evidence is because we go ahead in our minds to the disaster movie that we've written, and we become the main actor in it. We choose the other characters. We are very good at disaster movies, and we spend our whole time trying to make sense of that, because it is in the future and it hasn't happened and it may never happen. But the subconscious mind doesn't know about the future. It doesn't know about the past, really. It's like a computer, and it has all the past in it, and it influences what we think and do. But it doesn't actually know that there's anything other than right now, because the subconscious mind was the mind we had when we were hunter-gatherers. And hunter-gatherers had a much more simple view on life. They needed to survive, and that's the one instinct we're born with is for survival. We need to survive, and our young need to survive, which is why we put so much into our children and worry about them so much too. So the subconscious mind's job is to collect information about what might be a threat to our survival, and it sees anything that it doesn't understand or know about, or hasn't happened before, as a threat to our survival. If you take it right back to before we were born, one of the first experiences most of us have had is being born itself. And we've been in this nice, safe place for 9 months, and we are ready to leave now, but we don't know if we're going to survive. And that fear that we might not survive has a huge impact on us, because if we knew we were going to survive, it would be all right. But the subconscious mind goes into, supposing I don't survive, what am I going to do? How am I going to get through this? And of course, all of us survived that experience. Some don't, but we all did. And the first thing the subconscious mind does is look around to see what it is that made us survive. And what's usually happening is that mum is holding us and feeding us. So the subconscious mind, being a computer, just takes that whole thing in and decides that what we really need then is just for somebody to be there to love us, and everything will be all right, and something in our mouths and everything will be all right. And when you think about how many people have those two things that they turn to for comfort whenever there's any problems, you can see that that's one of the very first things we learned about survival. And, you know, when mum laid you down in a cot after that and went out of the room, one of your survival techniques had just left the room. You were, oh my goodness, I guess, so you suck your thumb or your fingers or a dummy and you go to sleep. And it worked, because mum did come back, because you didn't know if she was ever going to come back. There was nothing in the computer records to say that she would. And so when mum comes back in, we've just reinforced the message that something in our mouths, and maybe a dream about mum holding us or us being back in the womb, made us survive. So they become belief systems. And with the oral thing, we reinforce that all through through school, we might bite our fingernails, we might chew the tops of pencils. You see people sitting and thinking with their finger in their mouth, and it becomes the way that we comfort ourselves. We fall over and graze our knees, and because mum believes the same thing, she says have a biscuit, it'll make it feel better, and it seems to work. Everything like that seems to work. And then when we get to teenage years, we again leaving the womb of our family, so the subconscious mind goes into, oh, it's the unknown again. And this unknown thing is one of our big things that can create fear in us. And so as teenagers, going out into the unknown, we also are putting ourselves into a situation where we need to find somebody to take mum's place. So we're looking for a partner, and something in our mouths to make us feel better. And that's why teenagers are so vulnerable to smoking, because the tobacco companies know this. Well, they don't understand why, to be honest. They just know that they're very good at getting teenagers to start smoking, and they've got a customer for life. So, but it's because of that oral thing, and the fact that cigarettes are not actually physically addictive, because otherwise every smoker would have to smoke in the same pattern. Government leaflets have said it's more addictive than heroin, but if it were, people would be crawling up the walls if they went on a long distance flight and couldn't have their fix every 20 minutes day in your body. So what they have done is used that fear of not being able to survive and needing something in your mouth to actually sell us a product that kills us, which is very strange, isn't it? Because if we had thought about it that way, we would never have done that. But what fear does is also it shuts down the frontal lobe of our mind, which is the conscious reasoning part of our mind. Because if a lion walked in the room right now, we wouldn't sit here discussing, well, that's a strange thing to be happening. It's not a normal thing. You know, what should we do? We need to just run. And that's what the hunter-gatherer had learned and has taught us, that if there is a danger around that's very real, you need to get out and you need to run. And these days, we don't have wild animals walking into the room. So we have manufactured in our own minds all sorts of things that might be a threat to our survival. And that threat to our survival can take the form of emotional stuff as well. So it might be that you've had a row with your partner and you think they might leave you. So there's this feeling that, you know, I'm going to be on my own. What will I do? How will I survive? And it can be very physical threats. Obviously, if you're hanging off the edge of a cliff by your fingernails, you need fear. Fear is a good emotion in the right place. But when it comes into a place where it's not helpful, then it just becomes something that creates in us the need to either fight, run, or freeze, which I changed into, it's either stress, it's anxiety, which stress leads on to anxiety if it's not dealt with. Anxiety leads on to depression, because if you were a cat and you were being chased by a dog, you might first of all try to swipe it, so you'd fight, and then you'd start running, and you'd probably go up a tree and go to sleep, because the dog will get bored and go. But the animals know that they need to rest and recover after a threatening situation. And so they go through the stress and the anxiety that makes them run. So all of their vital forces, vital things are actually doing it, which is why running is a good exercise to actually de-stress you, because your body is doing what it thinks it needs to do anyway. So if you're that cat and you are up the tree and you've gone to sleep and you've rested and recovered, which is what we need to do whenever we have a stressful situation, but we don't. We think we have to carry on. The cat would come down from the tree and not even give another thought as to whether the dog might still be there or whether another cat might come along. Whereas if it was us, because we have this conscious reasoning part of our mind, we go into the future and start saying, what if? What if there's another dog around? What if he attacks me again? What if I don't find a tree to go up? What if, and what if, and what if? And so we spend most of our time in this world what ifing.
My arm exercises and listening to a webinar at the same time. A webinar.
And so if we start going what ifing, then we are going to create that disaster movie in our minds that the subconscious, being a computer, can't reason that it's actually in the future we're thinking of that, and it might not even happen. The subconscious thinks it is happening, and it is happening right now. And by it happening right now, because it is happening right now according to the subconscious, it will produce all of the feelings that make us go into that fight or flight. And if we don't deal with those feelings, if we don't actually put it back into its place and come back into the present moment and see, actually, none of that's happening. You know, I came down from the tree and there was no dog around, and I just went out for a walk and it was lovely. And, you know, it's more about seeing where you are right now rather than keep creating more and more disaster movies that we can create those feelings of fight, flight, and then freeze. And even with the freeze bit, which is the rest and recovery, I prefer to call it, people are so afraid of it because it means they can't get on with their lives, they can't get on with their jobs, they can't do this, they can't do that. You know, they just want to go to sleep, they just want to, they quite often, after a very stressful period, end up with an illness. So they might have something like a cold or something that puts them into bed. And that's, their body is trying to say to them, just rest, recover. You know, you've been through something where your immune system was depleted, because when we go into the fight and flight, if we were a herd of wildebeest in Africa, and one at the back saw a lion, it would send a message that instantly through that whole pack to run. And it wouldn't need to actually say, hey, there's a lion back here. And they wouldn't need to see it. All they need to know is that they've picked up on the energy of that one that thinks they saw a lion. So whether they did or not, their whole pack are going to start running. And that's sort of what we've done with this whole pandemic thing. We've got this thing that's unseen. None of us can see it. None of us know whether or not we are going to come into contact with it. Like any virus, you know, the common cold, we don't know where we picked it up. We don't know when we did. And we don't know if we're going to. But what has been created is such fear that we're all running anyway. So we're all feeling that anxiety that if I go out, I might, even if I just run past somebody in the street. And a doctor's, apparently somebody was telling me, a doctor said this recently, and she was an intelligent doctor, and she said, you know, I'm symptom free, but if I go out running and I run past somebody, they could catch it. And there's nobody has ever caught a virus that way. But we believe it because we're being told, we're being fed in the media, all of this information, a lot of it contradictory, a lot of it is being just produced to make us frightened. And we're buying into it because we're like that pack of wildebeest. We've picked up that somebody somewhere did see a lion, and we're all running as if we've all seen that lion. And actually, is the lion even there? We don't know. We only have other people's word to take for it. And the chances of us actually being caught by that lion are pretty remote, but we're still running like mad. So what I want to achieve with you today is that if you understand how the mind works, I always think it's easier for you to deal with what's actually going on in your own bodies. Because if you keep going into this stress, what will happen is that you will lower your immune system, because when we're running like that pack of wildebeest, when we're on the run, we don't need to worry about whether we catch something or not that we might need a good immune system for. So all of our energy goes into our arms and legs, which is why you feel most of your tension in your arms and legs. Your heart beats faster, your stomach churns, it doesn't really want to stop and eat, and if it does, it wants a quick fix of sugar or carbs, and you just keep running because you are still feeling those feelings, and it feels as though that's what's actually happening to you anyway. So if you had an immune system that was taking up your energy, it would be a waste of time, because actually you're more likely to die from the lion catching you than you are from a cold. So your immune system thinks, okay, I don't need to be so strong. So by actually coming into this present moment, and that's where, in a way, mindfulness has become a bit of a buzzword, but it's always been the way that we've taught people to use their minds, because actually the subconscious only knows this present moment, and it's using information from the past to judge this present moment. So it's using all the knowledge of things that have happened in the past, things we know to be true, and things we've also got wrong and made up, especially when we're children. We take things on that, so say when you're a child, your parents split up, and it's an argument between the two of them, but the child might be thinking, Daddy's left because he doesn't love me anymore, I must be unlovable. So a lot of our belief systems are untrue. And the thing about our belief systems is that they send little thoughts through your mind every day. All the time, your mind never really settles. And however much Buddhist monks think that they, would say you have to just keep meditating and stay in this present moment and, let those thoughts go. Actually, we never do. And those thoughts are really powerful. And if you actually listen to your thoughts, you realize that actually I've been having those thoughts every day of my life virtually, because they are what your belief systems are based on. And so if you're thinking, most popular one for women is, does my bum look big in this? Every time you go out, you think, everybody can see my bum, everybody can see how big it is, and worrying about it. Everybody else is walking past you thinking, what a lovely lady, and so we have to be aware of the fact that our belief systems are actually driving us to have these repetitive thoughts, one after the other, all day, every day. And the thoughts you had today are the same thoughts as you had yesterday. And the thoughts you had yesterday are very much the same thoughts as you had the day before. So we're reinforcing those belief systems all the time, because the subconscious, being a computer, thinks if you're thinking that, that's the truth. That must be right. That must be what it is right now. And so to actually change things, and there are lots of self-help books out there, and there are lots of ways that people will teach you to stay in this present moment. But unless you're going to meditate all day, every day, and be consciously aware of it, you're going to keep slipping back into the what-ifing and, oh my goodness, what happened, So we either go into the past or the future. Very little of our day is spent in the present moment. And by actually bringing ourselves into that present moment, yes, we can see that we actually haven't got anything to worry about. Right here, right now, we're well, we're safe, we're fed, we've got a roof over our heads, all of those things. So unless that's not happening to you, unless you aren't safe, there is no reason for you to be caught up in fear, because fear is that false evidence accepted as reality. So we're just chundering off into the future, creating our disaster movie. And, you know, the media has stirred up that fear of the unknown. You know, this thing is an unknown. We don't know where it is. We can't see it. We don't know who's got it. And so it's created something that is absolutely huge. So if you can at least use this time, for me, this time is actually really interesting, because we're making history. So one day children are going to be taught in schools about this time. So, you know, we have to be careful what sort of history we're laying down. But also, there are lots of benefits to this time. So even though we might not like what's happening and we may feel very afraid of what's happening, a lot of things are happening that are quite good. You know, the planet is healing very quickly. And it's amazing, isn't it, how quickly Mother Nature is putting things right. And it shows us that if we could just use this planet a little bit more mindfully, then we would perhaps be able to turn things around very quickly, instead of the long years of waiting for, you know, the governments to bring in their plans to cut emissions, cut this, cut that, you know, use more renewable energies and things like that. We can all do something right here, right now, because we've discovered that by working from home, by not using our cars as much and not doing unnecessary journeys, we've already made a big difference to the planet, and that's happening all over the planet. So it's quite interesting, really, that we've done that. Also, what's happening is that apparently people are starting to actually cook instead of just going out and buying takeaways and processed foods. And so people are actually starting to eat more healthily. And I personally have noticed from the day one, when everybody went panic buying, to now, the difference in because I'm a vegetarian, and so I was quite happy in the first week because everybody was buying all the processed food, and I went to the aisles where the vegetables were, and there were plenty of them. And I also only eat organic where I can, so I was finding that people never buy that much anyway, so I was always okay, could always get food. Now, I went last night to try and get some food. I had to go to 2 supermarkets to get the vegetables I needed, because people are buying. The vegetable aisles are now looking like the tinned aisles did on the first week. And so when I go in there now, all I can see is upturned baskets where it's all gone. And the interesting thing is, most of the organic food is gone. And they've left, I mean, I want some broccoli. If anyone knows where I can get some organic broccoli, then let me know, because every time I've been in there for the last few weeks, there has been nothing except all this broccoli that's not organic, and I prefer not to buy that. So, you know, we can all do our little bit, but maybe it's happening anyway. Maybe we're all starting to think more mindfully about what we're doing, how we're doing it. The other thing that's happening is that people are being quite innovative, because even on that first week, a company were on the news who had, before that, made perspex signs for shops to sell stuff. So they were in the big shops like John Lewis, who are now closed down. So they thought they were going to have to furlough all their workers and close down. But they came up with the idea of making those big masks. And they're the company who did that. They turned their production into making the face masks for the NHS, and immediately were getting them out within that first week. And now we see on TV, whenever we see anything in a hospital, we see that they're all wearing them. And that's fantastic. So, you know, from a disaster to an opportunity. came along where somebody could do some good with what they're doing. And there's lots and lots and lots of stories about that sort of thing, where people are realizing what's actually essential in life, and they're taking more care of people, they're worrying about people more, whether they've got enough shopping, whether they can go out or not. And where we probably wouldn't have even thought of asking our neighbours, do you need anything when I'm going to the supermarket? And now we would, do that as an automatic thing. So I'm sure you can all think of some more benefits of this lockdown, but if you can start to see this as an opportunity rather than something to be afraid of, and start to work towards what you're going to be doing with your life in the future. So you can, if you're going to future pace, stop making a disaster movie. Let's make a wonderful, wonderful new world. Let's make something that is actually going to help us to start to heal this world rather than do damage. So is there anything anybody would like to ask me about any of that? I've gone on and on. Nobody's come in, so I don't know if there's anybody wants to ask me anything.
Tell us a bit more about mindfulness and how we can, consciously use our minds to come back to the present moment and enjoy what we have, and maybe work on leaving behind some of those belief systems that you were talking about.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, you have to recognize the belief systems. And if you don't start listening to your mind and what it's running through it all the time, those thoughts that are running through it all the time, and what I usually suggest people do is to, when they notice a thought, like I'm not good enough or whatever, write it down, okay? And then write down, because most of the time we don't even know we're thinking that. If I said to you, you're thinking I'm not good enough, you would probably say, I don't think I think that. But when you actually hear those thoughts, and you're the only person who really knows what those thoughts are, because each person's are unique to them, depending on their history and what they've gone through. So write the thought down when you notice it, because noticing it is the first objective, really, because you can't do anything. If you don't know why you're doing something, or you don't know what you're doing, you can't change it. So notice the thought, write it down, and then write down, what would I prefer to think? What would I actually want to think rather than this? So rather than I'm not good enough, how about writing I am awesome, which is what I always try to get people to become, because we are all awesome. There is no body on this planet that you would think, if you would meet them and think, you're not good enough. And yet we all think it about ourselves. And so all of those belief systems have been programmed into us by us. We're responsible for it. It's no good going back into the past and saying, it was my mum's fault, it was my dad's fault, it was my teacher's fault, because they said this and it made me think that. Actually, the events in your childhood don't actually have that much of an impact on you. It's what you took on from it that really matters. And that's a little bit more tricky, and that's the sort of work I do, is I help people to discover what it is they took on from the events in their life, okay? But on a very surface level, first of all, notice that you're having those thoughts, write them down, and then think about what you would prefer to think instead, okay? Now, without going to the place where the child part of you took on those belief systems and helping her to think differently, you can still do that in a way, because if you recognize that you've been thinking that thought about yourself for a long time, just imagine you're giving that child part of you a hug and saying, it's not true, you are good enough. You're awesome, in fact. Look what you've been through in life. Look what you've done. Look what you've survived. you know, all of the things that have happened in your life, and we all have these little disaster movies that do happen, and yet we survived them all. And so we've done pretty well, you know, 100% success rate of surviving everything we've been through. And most of the time, when you get as old as I am, you'll realize that when you look back on your life, most of the disasters that happened actually brought you to where you are now, which is actually good. So, you know, a lot of the things that we think are going wrong in life, like this situation now, may turn out to be the best thing that ever happened, which is why I'm saying, look at what we are achieving in this time, rather than seeing it as a disaster that we've all got to be afraid of. If we could just cut the fear and put in actually anticipation, because fear and anticipation, anticipatory excitement and anticipatory fear are actually physically in our solar plexus the same feeling. So when we get excited about something, we feel the same way physically as we do when we're feeling fear. So why don't we start calling it excitement? Why don't we sit here in our homes now, where we can't do a lot? This is a good time to rest and recover for a start. So instead of getting what we would call depressed about it, just take it as, actually, do you know, I needed some time to rest and recover, because I've been through a lot of stress in my life, and I've been holding on to it and trying to keep going and trying to be this person who is, you know, perfect. And I accept now there's nothing perfect, because the imperfect is what gives us the experiences that we learn and grow from. So it's about actually seeing anything that's happening in your life as being okay. And that way we can stay more in the present moment, because we can start appreciating what is happening right now. And so it's not a case of you sitting there doing a meditation on mindfulness. It's not a case of you having to do that every day. It's every minute of every day. Realize, actually, do you know, I'm sitting here in my home, I'm comfortable, I'm safe, everything is all right. And do you know, there are some good opportunities here to do things differently. I mean, look what Val's set up. She wouldn't have thought of doing this if this situation hadn't come about. So, you know, it's actually given people an opportunity to get together and be more connected than we were before. You know, I didn't know any of you before. Now I do. And so, you know, it's a good opportunity for us to connect with people that perhaps we wouldn't have met any other way. There are just so many good things that are going to come out of this.
Just very quickly, is because we might time out, but if we time out, we can reconnect. I'm just saying, everyone, we can reconnect. I just set up again, so you just press start and you reconnect. But just like tying up with what you're saying now. So because this is going, what I hear people saying, because it's going on and it's another week, and so although the virus or whatever is happening, it might not be whatever, if it's real or unreal, the situation we are in. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, when it's another week or it's another day, people might wake up in the morning and they might feel anxious about it, or they might worry about their children, their education and everything. So even though they might agree with everything is being said here, as we're all humans and we all have all these feelings, one day when people wake up and they feel anxious, what would you say as a few practical steps of like how to deal when they wake up in the morning or they're about to go to bed at night, and then they suddenly feel all this anxiety of like, what are we doing this?
Yeah, no, I've got a really good one for that. Okay, because we all wake up like that at times. Of course we do. We all think, oh my goodness, today I've got to deal with this, that and the other. The way I start every morning is with a gratitude list. And it has to be in the present moment, because you start it with I am. Okay, so you always start with I am, because that's right now. And I am grateful means I must have received whatever it is I'm going to be grateful for, whatever it is I put on the end of that. I must have received it already, because you wouldn't be grateful for something you haven't got. So we could start off with, I am grateful for my good health. I am grateful for my strong immune system. And so by doing that, you're actually instructing your subconscious, which is always in the present moment and hears everything you say and think, that you must already have a good immune system. So it works, your mind and body work together. And when your mind says you've got a good immune system, you have. And it can happen really quickly. Whereas the way that we do it with, you know, sort of taking herbs and foods and things will take a long time to build up our immune system. And we're fighting the fact that because we're running away, our immune systems are getting less good. But just by thinking differently, and so a gratitude list in the morning and at night before you go to bed, just telling yourself, I am grateful for whatever it is you want in your life that day. And it's how we manifest anyway, because we usually try to manifest our disaster movie. Manifesting works in the same way, whether you're